Hello. Israel and Iran are fighting. Whoa, that's never happened before. And everyone is already churning out World War III memes again. And it's only been like the 5th time this month. While lots of really sick missile footage is being released at the moment, and everyone on the internet is claiming that these two are at full-scale war with each other, and that Israel is finally gonna use the nukes they deny having, I think it's important to remember that these two countries can't actually go to war with each other in a traditional sense. Iranian tanks aren't going to be fighting in Tel Aviv, and Israeli grunts aren't going to be clearing houses in Tehran, and I'm going to tell you why. Today, I will be taking on the role of the nothing ever happens guy, and explain how this probably isn't going to be going down as what started the Third World War. If I have to see one more "you boys like Iran" memes, I'm gonna go play in traffic. Now I should say I do not do live up-to-date coverage on certain topics. But you might still be wondering why Israel and Iran they attack each other. Great question. Now if you want a detailed breakdown of what is happening right now, go watch like Chris Cappy or Preston Stewart or just the news or something. But the spark notes of what is happening right now is that negotiations with Iran failed to stop them from enriching weapons-grade uranium. Israel then conducted major strikes on nuclear facilities, and now both sides are exchanging explosives. Bada bing, you're all caught up. If you are new to the world of geopolitics, I want to first start with the simplest reason as to why these two countries cannot have a real war with each other. And by real war here, I mean firefights, cool tank battles, heroic charges up a hill into machine gun fire, that kind of thing. Israel is here, Iran is here, and at risk of you clicking off within the first minute, that's basically the video. See, between Israel and Iran is this pesky little thing called the entire country of Iraq, and Jordan and Syria. I always forget about those last two. See, as a child, I was indoctrinated to hate Iraq after 2003, so sometimes I forget there are other countries over there. Neither side, realistically, has any way of actually getting to the other. The shortest distance between Israel and Iran is 600 miles, and that's just where the borders touch, not where actual military formations would start from and end up at. Oh, but Justin, we invaded Iraq twice and Afghanistan, which is even farther, and Israel's a lot closer. And to that I say, shut up, I'll get there. If you cannot tell, I am highly caffeinated and have a hatred of both war and fear-mongering. Cheese and fish-mongering I'm cool with, those guys can stay. The only way either side could get to the other is through other countries, and I can promise you that is not going to happen. The nice thing about Iraq, Jordan, and Syria is that they all dislike both Iran and Israel. Iraq has a long history of conflict with Iran, and both fought arguably one of, if not the, most brutal war of the second half of the 20th century. Iraq also still has a heavy American presence, with 2,500 of America's finest rotating in and out at any given time, meaning that is a no-go for Iran. Also, Iraq doesn't even recognize Israel as a country, so it's pretty unlikely they're going to be cool with Merkava tanks rolling from west to east. Jordan and Israel have relations, but they're not the best. However, Jordan is Western aligned, meaning Iran wouldn't be passing units through. And even if Jordan let Israeli troops through, Israel still wouldn't be able to even get close to Iran. Syria and Israel are not good friends, to put it lightly, and while Iran does have a bit of influence left on Syria, the new government has increasingly tried aligning itself with the West, so Iran being able to push through is nigh impossible. The future of Syrian and Israeli relations is moving, at least on the surface, towards higher levels of cooperation. But you also can't get to Iran from Syria without going through Iraq or Turkey, and Turkey ain't gonna be playing ball here. The short of the long is that no country in and around the region gains anything from Iran and Israel going at it with each other in a conventional war, meaning they're not gonna be doing anything that would help the other side accomplish that goal. For a lot of these countries, watching Iran and Israel fight is like watching two drunk guys fighting in your backyard. Yes, it is incredibly entertaining and makes for good internet content. However, eventually, a stray beer bottle is gonna be flying into one of your windows. Okay, but fine. Let's enter thought experiment mode. Let's assume that all the countries between Israel and Iran decided, fuck it, let's just see what happens, and let both sides try to get to the other first. Again, this would not happen because that would mean that there would be a massive war going on somewhere in the middle of Iraq, but I digress. Let's first assume Iran wants the home team advantage, so they stay put, and Israel is the one doing the invading. Israel would have the advantage in the air. If there's one thing they're good at, it's performing risky airstrikes in contested airspaces. That would theoretically allow them to open up an area long enough to bring in invasion forces via cargo planes. The problem is that Israel has 8 total transport aircrafts, those being C-130s, and one of them is specifically designed for search and rescue operations. Not only that, but the majority of Israel's vehicles are not air mobile, at least with C-130s, meaning any invasion force is going to have to be with trucks and infantry. Basically, if Israel tried to pull this off, assuming no C-130s got shot down on the way there, which at least one probably would be, all Iran would have to do is wait for the planes to land, fire off a few missiles and drones, and the invasion forces kaput, to borrow a phrase. That means that they would essentially have to move their entire army by land. Problem: most of Israel's assets are designed with maximum protection for urban combat, only to be deployed a few dozen miles away from their own supply bases. Keeping a 600-mile minimum logistical train supported for assets designed to not be more than a few dozen miles away from home base is not only very hard, but impossible to keep defended from missiles and drone strikes. Also important to keep in mind, Iran looks like this. These are mountains, particularly nasty mountains at that. Iran is an incredibly geographically isolated region, and taking the fight to them on land ain't gonna be a pretty sight, even if you were able to just magically transport yourself right to their border. Now, if we flip the tables, Iran does have a more robust airlift capability. They have roughly 40 cargo planes that realistically could be used to move assets from Tehran to Tel Aviv. Still too few to perform a full-on invasion, but let's just keep the game going. As their air force gets smaller and smaller by the day, RIP some of the last F-14s available, their ability to protect their own assets goes down. Then I promise you that an F-35 is very, very capable of bringing down an old C-130. Add on the fact that the Iron Dome is one of, if not the densest air defense networks in the entire world, and that is not going to happen. Now, their actual army would be more suitable for making the long trip to get to Israel, with lighter vehicles with better gas mileage. But that's the difference between a low F on a school paper and a medium F on a school paper. You still failed miserably. Alright, thought experiment over. Hopefully I convinced you that, at least in real meaningful ways, neither country has any way of getting to the other, leading to some kind of war where one side decisively wins, one side decisively loses, and there is some swapping of flags over respective capitals. So what would a full-scale version of this war actually look like? Well, we're already kind of seeing it. Israel has no shortage of aircraft sorties they can run over Iran, which we've already seen plenty of. Likewise, Iran has no shortage of missiles they can fire into Israel, which we've also already seen plenty of. Now, Iran has claimed a few F-35 kills in recent days. However, based on presented evidence, unless Iranians are actually the size of insects, I am not convinced. In a protracted air campaign, inevitably Israel will lose at least 1 or 2 planes, but I'm not going to be claiming I know what those numbers currently sit at. One major deciding factor of this conflict specifically are the missiles and drones going into Israel itself. The Iron Dome is very good at what it does. However, the October attacks from Hamas brought to light the main weakness of any missile-based air defense system, and it's the fact that they simply cannot intercept everything at once. Saturation barrages like Hamas performed, and Iran is now performing, is a method of penetrating air defenses, if you're unable to perform something like an SEAD operation. The issue is that you have to accept that upwards of 90% or more of your expensive ammo is going to be shot down. Saturation attacks are a very expensive and resource-intensive way of achieving what we have seen as questionably successful strikes. Blowing up apartment complexes does not mean that a handful of F-16s are going to stop blowing up your heads of state. The struggle then becomes, can Iran launch more missiles at Israel than Israel can intercept? It's hard to gauge how much ammo Iran has to spend. but there have been reports that Israel and the US are running out of ammo for the Iron Dome. No big surprise there because it's seen quite a bit of action recently, and interceptors are not cheap. The race then becomes, can Israel take out Iranian ballistic sites before they run out of interceptors? And to that, I do not have an answer to. It is a strategic game of whack-a-mole that no sources with knowledge on the situation have made me privy to. Would be cool though, maybe one day I'll get there. Now, despite both sides being so far away from each other, and that neither side is going to see an opposing tank rolling through the other's streets, that doesn't mean there aren't people on the ground on both sides. Mossad now very famously conducted a slew of strikes on high-profile Iranian targets from inside Iran. Allegedly, the planning for this strike happened over many months, and once everyone was set, the commandos inside of Iran used one-way attack drones and loitering munitions to take out their objectives. This allegedly occurred from an established covert drone base, which served as the heart of the operation. Their primary job was to soften Iran's ability to stop their air campaign, which according to current reports, included around 200 IAF aircraft, dropping roughly 330 bombs on over 100 targets. But that is largely the extent that Israel can play the ground game in Iran. Covert strikes against very specific targets and operations that are specifically meant to shape a larger air campaign. I know Ace Combat taught you that you can win a war entirely with an F-16 with unlimited missiles, and every first-person shooter these days has the Special Forces dudes winning the war by themselves. But you can't land a plane on the front lawn of a government building and claim to own it, and a handful of commandos, against popular belief, cannot defeat an entire army. Iran has similar constraints, and when they want effects to be leveraged on Israel's turf that aren't rocket-powered, they use their network of proxies to do the dirty work for them. However, these groups, especially now, are much weaker than they were just a few years ago. Additionally, Iran lost their ability to operate as much in Syria. Just as I'm writing this, Syria gave Israel the thumbs up to use their airspace to intercept Iranian missiles. So you can best believe that they would use that to hit any Iranian proxies they think are about to cause them some issues. Not that Israel really cares about respecting sovereign airspace anyway, but you get the idea. With all that said, these proxies really have no way of achieving real military objectives other than using up Israeli ammunition and inflicting some casualties here and there. So, neither side can get to each other. The personnel that can infiltrate the borders can only achieve very specific, limited objectives. And even if one side is able to blow up buildings that belong to the other, history shows us that bombing campaigns alone cannot win a war. If they did, Vietnam would look like this. There is the cyber warfare angle to all this, but in practical terms, at least in this conflict, it's a bombing campaign with extra steps. And that leaves us with the big question. What about the outside parties that can really crank this situation up to 11? Well, we've already talked about how all the neighbors don't really want to get too involved. The US is already somewhat involved. Russia says it will align itself with Iran, but realistically they want to position themselves to be better trade partners with countries like Saudi Arabia, and their military is a little busy at the moment. America is, and will likely, increase our own participation in this. Aircraft carriers are moving there as we speak, but, at least in this humble YouTuber's opinion, American involvement is going to be limited to intercepting missiles, providing ammo to Israeli forces, and a bit of strongly worded Truth Social posts as a form of saber rattling. Really, what we're seeing is not new. It is a continuation of things that have been going on for literal decades at this point. That doesn't mean that what's happening isn't a big deal, but so is every other time Israel and Iran started exchanging ordnance. Israel's been bombing Iranian nuclear facilities since before I was born. I highly doubt that this is the event that historians will look back on and claim to be the start of World War III, mostly because that's already happened. And on that note, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.